Hi, I'm Danielle, and I'm so glad that you're here because together we're going to work through big stuff. Casey Beros had interviewed hundreds of medical experts over her career, and she also is the host of Channel 10's health program, Well Traveller. She also built her entire career on teaching people how to navigate the healthcare system. So when Casey's own father got sick, she thought she had it covered, but she was wrong. Within months, she was watching her dad's addiction resurface and traversing a healthcare system that was set up like a maze and learning that all of her professional expertise meant absolutely nothing when she was sobbing in a hospital corridor at 2 a.m. The woman who had spent 15 years telling others how to advocate for their health was about to discover what advocacy actually looks like when your world is falling apart. That education nearly destroyed her. But now it could save thousands of other people from making the same mistakes. Let's get to the podcast. Hi, Casey, and welcome to Big Stuff.
Hi, thanks for having me.
My pleasure. It's been a while since we have connected. We've known each other for a very long time now, actually. And I have been watching your journey, I suppose, if we're allowed to use the word, over the last little bit because it was so reminiscent of my own experience with my dad. So it was very, I don't want to say triggering because it wasn't triggering in the slightest. It was yearny, heart-panging stuff. And I really felt like I was along for the journey with you. How are you doing, now?
Well, thank you for asking. It's a great question, and I was just thinking about this morning because I think we often ask people how they are for that surface level answer, and I know when you ask me, you're asking me for the big stuff, the real stuff, the underneath. And the answer is I'm a bit all over the place, to be honest. On one hand, I am incredibly proud of this latest project, this book that I have written called Next of Kin. It was so cathartic to write about my experience of caring for Dad. And it's so cathartic getting to speak about him. I love getting to talk about him. I miss him so much. And so any opportunity to get to speak about him, whether it's with friends or professionally, it's always really nice because it's the closest to him that I get these days. And on the other hand, and you know this game because you're in a similar industry to me, being media and publishing, and there is a certain energy that is required when you are in promo mode, when you've got a book to sell or a course to fill or whatever it might be, that feels really incongruent with the reason why I'm in that situation at the moment. I've written this book about one of the worst things that ever happened to me, which was losing my dad. So to have I call them my promo pants, have my promo pants on and be out, banging my drum in order to get this really powerful, very special book that I'm so proud of into other people's hands. It's a weird, conflicting, it's a strange energy. So I think that the bittersweetness of it has thrown me a little bit, and that's okay. I'm here for that. And I'll work through that, but I'm just sort of sitting with that bittersweet.
Bittersweet is probably exactly the term that I was looking for when I was saying not triggering, kind of yearny, kind of that bittersweetness, the remembrance of being in that space, being with someone who I loved so dearly and caring for them at that end stage of life. Why don't we go back and tell us sort of what happened this at that point? And your dad was in Perth, there was a diagnosis. Talk us through what went down.
And moved to Sydney when I was 22. And 15 years later, I had very much built my life, built my career, had my family. We were very happily living on the East Coast. And it was June 2021, and I will never forget it because I had just released my first book, The Bad Girl's Guide to Better. And I was riding high on this kind of wave of positive reviews
It's still
and
in my
media
bookshelf,
coverage.
just over there, by the way. Still in my bookshelf.
Oh,
Just want you to know.
nice. And it was my first book, and I was so excited. I think in life we chase those highs, those champagne moments, right? We work towards them for a really long time. That book had been probably 2 years in the making and really a lifetime in the making, because it was about 16 lessons, life lessons that I wished that I had learned sooner. So really it was, everything that I knew in my life up till that point. But I had been actively working on it from pitch to getting it on shelves for 2 years. And I'll never forget, we were in Wagga Wagga. My husband had graduated from his master's degree, which had taken him 3 years to do. And I had spent all of those 3 years either on the tools myself, solo parenting to free him up to study, or editing his assignments. So we gathered all the family, the whole family came with me and our kids, and it was such a high of a day. And my career in the media often means that of my little family, it's often me in the spotlight. He's very much the stable, the steady, the rock solid job, the rock solid guy. And I'm the swings and roundabouts. It's a great day. It's a terrible day. I got the gig. I lost the gig. My life is
joy of
full of these ups and
freelancing.
downs.
Yeah.
Exactly right. It's a roller coaster.
Yeah.
And he, unfortunately, just has to strap in and be along for the ride. And so I had received a text from Dad the night before saying something along the lines of, hey, can we have a quick chat soon? Now, as soon as I receive a message like that, and I suspect for most people listening, I just speed dial the source. Like, I panic immediately thinking that there's something seriously wrong. And I think we were out for dinner at the time, or we were going to the ceremony for my husband. There was some reason, and I said, is everything okay just at my husband's graduation or dinner or wherever we were at the moment? And I realize now looking back, there was this sort of ninja-like avoidance where he didn't actually answer my question as to whether everything was okay, but he responded sort of cheerily enough that it didn't ring any alarm bells for me. And I really wanted to give my husband his moment in the sun. In our family, those felt quite rare, and I wanted to be present and just let him really have his moment. And I've got this beautiful photo of me, my husband, our 2 children. We are smiling ear to ear. He's in his gown and his cap. It's such a happy, proud day. And yet when I look at it, my stomach sinks, because later that evening when I connected with Dad, as soon as the graduation ceremony was over and we were home and I had a quiet minute, I called him. And those phone calls that you receive and you immediately know that there is bad news about to be delivered to you. There's something about their tone or the energy. And as soon as Dad told me what was going on, I just felt the blood rush from the top of my head down to the bottom of my toes. And, we were in a rental that I had stayed in for a couple of days. I was very unfamiliar with the house. And yet I could explain to you in vivid detail every element of the room in which I stood and then sat and then slumped on the floor as he told me what was going on. And I remember, it's very typical of my personality, I sort of tried to orient myself in space and time by springing into action, which for me meant putting him on speakerphone and quickly Googling what it was that he was talking about, this mesothelioma that he had, which for people listening, if they're not familiar, is cancer from exposure to asbestos. And so I quickly Googled it, and my eyes are sort of frantically jumping from link to link. And all I'm seeing is, 6 months, 12 months, fatal, incurable. Like, I knew that this was not just bad news. This was kind of the worst news. And that moment, there are those moments in our lives where, this was such a happy day at such a happy time for me. And it was just the greatest reminder that everything can be going exactly right, and life still has the ability to pick you up by your ankles and shake you upside down. And look, I have to say, I'm grateful that it wasn't a call from someone saying, your dad had a heart attack and he's gone. I'm really grateful that it was him delivering the news to me, that we had some time. And so to cut a very long story short, 24 hours later, we got on a plane from Sydney to Perth, and It was COVID, June 2021. We had inadvertently moved to Perth because we couldn't leave again. We left our house with, dirty clothes in the laundry basket, food in the fridge. Our poor friends and family had to, pack up all of our stuff, put everything into storage, clean our apartment. And we had, moved to Perth, and fast forward 4 years and we're still here.
Wow. That was a wild time. COVID was a wild time. I think that we're going to look back in the history books at some point and just be astounded by all the masks and all the everything. It was such a surreal moment in history, but made all the more surreal by the fact that you then, did you go and stay with your dad immediately? Like what happened next?
So I guess my dad had never had a great relationship with money. He had, and I write about this in the book, he had never really built any sort of wealth. He didn't own a home, like so many others. But Dad was living in a 1-bedroom apartment that wasn't kind of government housing, but was the cheapest that you could possibly find. So there was no room for all 4 of us to lump in with him. We were very lucky. A friend of mine, her parents were away. And because we had to isolate, I almost forgot the word, it's been so long, because we had to isolate until our airport COVID tests came back negative. We were very lucky because they were away and we could just kind of lump into their house and wait for those tests to come back. And we ended up staying with them for about a month. They were amazing because we didn't know what we were doing. When we left the house, we thought we were going for 2 weeks, take Dad to a few appointments, get the lay of the land. And then I thought that probably we would all go back to Sydney. My husband would go back to work. I would kind of pack things up, and then I would probably move to Perth with the girls, and we would do long distance with my husband. He would keep his job. At that time, Dad had been given 6 to 12 months to live, and I am an eternal pessimist. So if you tell me 6 to 12 months, I hear 6 at best. And in a way, that's quite good because it meant that we didn't wait. We acted immediately. And I was like, right, if we've only got 6 months, I'm going to squeeze every drop out of those 6 months. So if that meant us living apart for 6 months, then that's what we were going to do. I figured my husband would come over every second weekend or something if we could afford it. We'd go back once a month. We'd make it work. And then, so I suppose COVID forced our hand a little bit. And in the best possible way, I like to think that's one of the gifts that Dad gave me was he really brought me back here. And we have a really beautiful quality of life here and an amazing community. My kids are so loved and so looked after. And I remember in Sydney, I used to think to myself, gosh, I wish there were a few more people around to love you. We had created this family and we had some family there, but it's not the same as being here. I've got siblings and my mom. I still have 2 grandparents, loads of friends, and we have houses here, not apartments like we had in Sydney. The quality of life and the cost of living is different here. So we are able to have friends over for a barbecue and throw the kids in the bath. And I feel like we're raising kids together here, whereas there I felt like we were raising them apart. So luck was on our side, and a couple of friends were going to live in Canada for a year, so we rented their place. It felt like green lights.
Almost like each next step became clear to you. And I think it's so interesting that you say now that, this thing that was this really challenging, really tough, really heartbreaking experience in your life led you to all of these great sort of life moments. And then now there is the release of next of kin, your new baby. Mm-hmm. But the journey of caring for somebody, I know that you're a medical journalist, so you have a lot of knowledge, right? Knowledge, that beautiful thing that means nothing when you're stuck in the emotional depths and swamps of all of the human feelings, right? So yes. You've got all of the knowledge, you've got so much experience navigating the health world within your work as both a TV presenter, as a journalist. You know a lot of stuff. You speak to a lot of experts. You knew so much about the medical system. How useful was any of that when you were in the depths of your dad is dying?
Mm-hmm. It I'll answer that in two ways. The first way is it was incredibly helpful. I think that knowledge is absolutely power in this setting. And that surprised me. I thought if there was anybody well positioned to advocate for him, to buy him more time, to get him a great result, to get him the best treatment and care, it was me. It's why I stepped into the role, because I felt like I had those skills to be able to contribute. And it was incredibly difficult. And that's partially why I wrote the book. What's a huge driver for me writing the book was because I found myself thinking frequently, what if English wasn't your first language? What if you couldn't read or write? What if you had no family support network? If I had $1 for every time a nurse came to our house to look after Dad or to deliver a medication or whatever it was, who said to me, he is so lucky to have you, the vast majority of people that we see day in, day out are completely on their own. I would be very wealthy. And that breaks my heart. So this book really is everything I wish I knew before I stepped in and everything that I learned along the way. Because while everybody's journey, there's that word again, is unique. I know, I hate it. We need something else to replace it with.
I know, but adventure just doesn't quite sound right in this particular circumstance.
No, it doesn't. Experience, while everybody's experience of care will be different, and everybody's position is unique because they're dealing with a different human being, a different disease, different diagnosis, different prognosis, different area of the healthcare system, and so on and so forth. I think there are some common domains to care, and I have thought really carefully about how I communicate them in this book, that even though we're viewing the experience through my lens of caring for my terminally ill father, that essentially the core skills in the book are the same, which is how do you get really good at navigating the healthcare system, and how do you become a really great advocate for yourself and for the people that you love within it. And so it doesn't matter whether you're caring for someone with a terminal illness, a chronic disease, an addiction, a mental illness, a disability, a particularly neurodivergent child. I'm in that world at the moment. In my own family, it doesn't matter. Those two core skills are the same. I used to have these dreams, entrepreneurial dreams about how can I fix the healthcare system, which sounds as ridiculous as it feels on the inside of my body. I can't fix the healthcare system. But what I realized after many years of trying to find the solution that I could create that would help fix the healthcare system, I realized that actually my power, the thing that I can contribute, is teaching individuals to navigate it better and advocate for themselves within it. That's the thing that I can do better than anybody else. And so that's really where my focus and attention lies now is, we should all cheer because we really do have one of the best healthcare systems on the planet. However, it is difficult to navigate. My nephew's been in a cast on his wrist. He's been in the cast for too long. She's been waiting to get back in on the public system to have the cast removed. And now the public system was supposed to call her. They said, give us 2 days, we'll call you back, we'll find you an appointment. It's now been 4 days, they haven't called, and she's like, stuff this, I'm going private. I was like, A, hooray that you have the resources to do that. Well done you. That's taking it into your own hands. Well done. The public system can only do what it can do. But B, most people either don't know or don't have the means to be able to switch systems like that. And the biggest point of all of that to her, and I guess to anybody listening, is it is up to you. Yes, they should have called. They didn't call.
Yeah.
It's up to her. It's up to you. Your results are your results. Your appointments are your appointments. We have to work within the system that we've got. And so that's what I feel particularly passionate about landing for people with this latest project.
You speak so articulately about navigating the system. Is there a part of you that is avoiding the conversation about navigating the emotional toil of caring? Because when I was caring for my dad, so I moved in with him. I was with him when he was diagnosed. I came home back to Australia. He was in New Zealand while he went through some treatment. Then they sort of said, go home, there's nothing else we can do. And I went and I stayed with him for sort of the last month, 6 weeks. And I wanted him basically to be able to die in his own home. I didn't want him to be in a hospice on his own in a country where he didn't have people, he didn't have friends, he didn't have family around. I didn't want him to be one of those statistics that you talk about where there's a nurse coming and there's nobody there caring for him. I wanted to make sure that he knew he was loved. I wanted him to be surrounded by love. Casey, I wasn't prepared for what happens when someone you love dies, when someone you love loses parts of themselves every single day right in front of your eyes. And I feel like there is so much education that needs to be had around that. Everyone we know is going to die. Everyone we love is going to die. And we have in this culture zero education really, or very little education about it. But what happened to you, like what happened for you personally when your dad, who you adored, started to fade away? What cancer, like cancer of the what is asbestos cancer? What is it technically, like what is it actually?
So it can be in a few places. So mesothelioma is cancer in the mesothelium, which is the lining of the organs. So for him, it was plural mesothelioma, which is the most common form. So that's the lining of the lungs. So if you imagine like a fishnet stocking sits around your lungs, the cancer was growing in the fishnet stocking. So it's not like, oh, you can go in and do surgery or radiation and try and nip it out. It's kind of in the water pipes surrounding the organ, which is partially why it's incurable. And, you know, the vast majority, I've heard some stories of people living some years with the condition, but I mean, Dad got 2.5 years, which was amazing. It's a lot better than the 6 to 12 months that we were told at the beginning. But so, I mean, to answer your question, I find it much easier. This is partially why I write. I feel like if I can put words around an experience, then it makes sense to me. And if it makes sense to somebody else, bonus. That feels like a great gift to be able to put into the world. But you use the word prepare or preparing. And I don't think that there's anything that can prepare you. Not losing a pet, not losing a grandparent. I don't think there's anything that can prepare you for losing, you know, particularly a parent. There is something, and I would say, I really believe this, and I have no evidence to support it other than anecdotal evidence, but I believe there is something particularly discombobulating for daughters losing their fathers, whether they were great fathers, terrible fathers, completely absent fathers. It's your first protector. It is the person that is going to stand between you and the big bad world, or the idea of that, if that wasn't a reality for you. So I think for daughters losing their dads, that's really tough. I also think for sons losing their mother, that is particularly tough. And we went through that in our household. My husband lost his beautiful mum back in 2019. We just had the 6-year anniversary yesterday. So I don't think that there is anything that can prepare you. And, you know, you and I are members of a heartwarming but really crappy club. And it's one that you can look at each other and have nothing else in common and know that you understand the hurt that comes with that. I suspect it's the same for widows, which I don't understand that pain. I suspect it's the same for parents who lose children, which I don't understand.
I do wonder, though, if losing a parent is kind of the natural order. So I think that losing a child is the unnatural. It's the unnatural order. So I feel like that is a different pain again. Were you close
Definitely.
with your dad all the way along? My dad was not a great dad for a large portion of my formative years, but he became a great friend and ally in my early 20s and right up until his death. He was one of the most spectacular humans in my life. And we had very much put to rest any of the shit. We'd had lots of late nights over copious amounts of wine and And I'm a great communicator, so I had very much been able to lay to rest any of the stuff. And you're absolutely right. His death brought up some very, very interesting things for me, which I thought had been sorted. So when self-esteem stuff came up, even just while I was there throughout the process, even while I was there, like weird stuff was coming up. As I became the carer, as this strong man became so weak and I became the carer, weird stuff started coming up for me.
I'll bet.
Yeah. I remember even one night cleaning my teeth, and in the mirror, I said randomly, not even knowing I was going to say it, it came from absolutely nowhere, all I ever wanted was for you to love me. And I thought, where did that come from? What? Of course he loves me. That's crazy. And it was like this part of me, this unresolved child part or something, this stuff came up. Did any of your stuff come up throughout the process?
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that you raised it, because I don't know that there's anyone, it doesn't matter how exceptional and perfect your upbringing was, what the setup was, whether your parents were together and had an idyllic marriage, whether they were split and remarried, whether they were single, it doesn't matter. I think there's always stuff, always stuff, particularly I think for our generation, because parents then didn't know what parents know now. We are really good at repair. We are voracious in learning everything that we can to try to set our kids up for success. Our parents absolutely wanted that for us. They just didn't have the resources at hand. It was a very, very different time. So I know very, very few people that came through childhood unscathed. Very, very few.
I don't think anyone does. Even us, when we're trying to do our very best, our kids are still going to have stuff that keeps therapists and coaches in business forever, because it's inevitable, right? It's inevitable.
No, that's right. And so, of course, stuff came up for me. And just for context, there are 5 of us. So Dad had 5 children to 4 different women. So there's one that's 10 years older than me, lives in America. Then there's me. Then there's one 15 years younger than me. Then like 20 years younger than me. Then 22 years younger than me. So I've got baby siblings. You know, my littlest brother was 17 when Dad died. He turned 18 the next day. And interestingly, we all had completely different relationships with him, and we all had stuff. My littlest brother probably was the one that really, really got it right at the end with him, but we all have stuff, and completely different stuff. And we were all raised by these different women, and so that brought its whole different dynamic together, and we adore each other. The 5 siblings have probably spent collectively maybe 2 weeks together in our lifetimes. And yet you put us in a room, we are undeniably related, and you couldn't find 5 people who like each other more. So we're very lucky, and our family tree is complicated. That stuff is difficult, you know, and now I try to look back with a lens of compassion. Dad had his own stuff around his own self-worth, his own value. He struggled in romantic relationships. I think that's evident from having 5 children to 4 different women, plus many, many others. So of course there was stuff. And you know, I'll say this because I think it's important to say, and it broke me for a little bit, was right towards the end, he kind of started pushing me away. And it broke my heart because, and I'm just talking in the last kind of couple of weeks, and that is probably par for the course. I think when we're going through our hardest things, we of course push the people that are closest to us away. And I know that Dad was really fearful of what was coming, and that was his experience that I could only witness. I couldn't go with him, no matter how much I wanted to. And no matter how hard we held hands, he was moving to the next world and I was staying here. And that, of course, I mean, if we were covered in buttons, there's not a button that wasn't pressed for both of us, for all of us. Like, this is the biggest of the big stuff. I really believe that. And anybody who asks me, I'll always tell them caring for him for 2.5 years was the hardest, roughest, toughest, most beautiful, valuable, richest time of my life. I don't think there's any experience that gives you more bang for your buck than you are. I say that when I'm in the trenches as a parent, you are in the trenches. You know that from caring for your dad. There is something so bizarre about the pendulum completely swinging from child to parent when you are caring for them in the same way that they cared for you. For me, it was, 40 years earlier, toileting, cleaning, managing emotions, feeding, all of the things that they did for us as a child, you're then doing for them. That's like, let's just call it what it is. That's a really bizarre experience. And I think that's part of what makes it so magical, is because you are forever changed. I am not the same person that I was going into that. I am forever changed in all of the best ways, having gone through the toughest of the tough with him. And I will say it was an honor. It was an honor to get to do that for him. He walked me in, I walked him out, and that feels like a privilege to get to do for someone.
That's a beautiful way. That's a beautiful way to describe it. That's a beautiful way to describe it. You mentioned in the book that, the meds are pretty strong. So what happened? What happened with him and the meds?
Yeah, my dad would be the first to admit he was very open about it. He really struggled with addiction, kind of in his, I would say his late teens, early 20s. And he always said, and bearing in mind that it was a very different time to what it is now. The drugs were very different. Yeah. They were kind of cleaner, purer, but they still had the capacity to wreak havoc on somebody's life. Sure. And Dad would say that, speed was his first addiction. And he always said that he was very grateful to heroin, because heroin was the drug that helped him to get off of speed in his kind of 20s, which in his mind was a far more dangerous drug. And he would say that me coming along, I think he was 29 when Mum fell pregnant with me, or when I was born. And he would always say that it was really me coming along that was his wake-up call to clean up his act. And his and Mum's relationship didn't last that long. He got high with me in the house, and Mum came home. I think I was little, maybe 1 or something. And he got high with me in the house, and Mum came home to an unsupervised baby. And Dad had taken himself off for a swim at the local public pool, which was just across the road. And she found drugs in the letterbox. And so for her, that was her non-negotiable. And so that was very much the end of the relationship. And, I think for most of Dad's life, I wouldn't have said that he was an addict. Look, he loved nicotine. He loved red wine, loved the attention of women. Those were his drugs of choice. And I would say that he wasn't an addict, but he was absolutely had some substance dependence issues with those things, coffee and, all of those types of things, and loved a good time. I'll admit, Dad used to say to me that he was almost relieved that he had ended up with a cancer that was completely out of his control, because he felt like, to use your word, he felt like he deserved cancer for all of the same reasons that he had treated his body like a ride at an adventure playground for most of his life. And so he was the first to admit that he was, I think he was always a bit scared of cancer, and he always thought that he would end up, with some awful cancer from treating his body badly. And then he ended up randomly with this disease from exposure to asbestos from when he went on a school camp when he was 16.
Wow.
That was his exposure.
So it's not like he didn't work with asbestos. He went one time. Did he even know that at that time that they were exposed? Did they realize there was an exposure?
I think he was 16 at the time.
Nobody even really knew about it then, did they?
No. And, we stopped mining it in Australia. I think it was 1984. And then we started phasing it out in 2003. And so, this was many years before that. It would have been sort of like the early 70s, I would have said. And so did they know? I don't know. They found out later that they definitely should not have been in that situation. But he was kind of relieved that he hadn't ended up with a cancer or that he had ended up with a cancer that was completely out of his control. That felt like that had taken that out of his hands. But to answer your question about addiction, so many of these medications that particularly for, pain and breathlessness and, he had a lung cancer, a cancer of the lung. And so unfortunately what happens with pleural mesothelioma is that the lung, that sort of fishnet stocking that I talked about, because it increases with cancer, the lung capacity shrinks and shrinks. And so they really struggle to get their breath. It's a very cruel, awful, awful cancer. And so for that reason, when we look at kind of opiates and morphine-based drugs, and this is when he's still kind of up and at 'em and walking around. So I'm talking tablets that he would take and what have you. They made him feel, he would say, quite smacky. That was the term that he used. It would make him feel quite sleepy. He didn't like the way that made him feel. And so I don't know who suggested this drug called fentanyl, and it may very well have been me. One of my family members was using fentanyl medically at the time.
Also
So
known
it may
as
have
hillbilly heroin, fentanyl.
Exactly right. Way more potent.
Yeah.
But I think we think that when it's medical, that it's clean, that it's been prescribed.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. And so if anybody has seen that kind of zombie crisis that they talk about, particularly in the US, which has really sort of superseded the opiate crisis over there, now fentanyl's the big thing, and it's much, much more powerful. And by the time it's cut with all of these awful things, it's, it's really deadly, and they're in big strife over there. And so I don't know who recommended it. It may very well have been me, but at some point we made the decision for him to try fentanyl. And I have to say this, like all addictions, this one of his was good until it wasn't.
Yeah, right.
That's usually how it rolls, right? In the beginning, it really did have a very powerful effect on him. It put wind in his sails where I knew that there was one. And so he was sort of pharmacologically fashioning the energy of being somebody who wasn't dying. And nobody would deny him that, particularly not me. My position on it at the time was there is no time for him to become an addict and join the junkies at the end of his street because he lived in a very urban town. There's no time for that. So who cares? If he becomes addicted to that and that helps get him longer, feel better, who cares? He's dying. Give him what he wants. Let's just make him feel good. And would I do anything differently? I don't know. What I would say is that his use increased significantly over a fairly short period of time. And I suspect, it was always prescribed. However, I suspect it's what they call off-label. So the drug is approved and it's approved in a certain way, but you're using it in a slightly different way. I don't think that it would have been approved to use at the level at which he was using it. And, when you're in a palliative care setting, so you're very much sort of towards the end, I think the doctors probably had the same feeling as me, which was,
he's dying.
If he likes it and it makes him feel good and he's dying, let him have it. And I suppose everything that goes up must come down. And so the flip side of that was some pretty severe anxiety. And, often we would be driving and he would be so anxious. I would have to pull the car over and he would have to get out and stand on the ground with no shoes on and kind of ground himself again. And for anybody who's listening who's had an anxiety attack or a panic attack or even just knows how it feels to feel really anxious, will know it's an awful feeling. It makes you feel like you want to run for the hills or climb out of your own skin or jump out the window. It's an awful feeling. And so watching that increase for him as the drug started getting less and less effective, even with higher and higher doses, watching that stop working and his heartbreak around that. You mentioned earlier, it's these little heartbreaks, these little losses. So the end is a big death, a big loss, but there are
little deaths along the way. Yeah.
Little deaths along the way. The death of their ability to get up in the morning and eat breakfast.
Yeah.
the
Can
death
no
of their
longer
ability
walk.
to get up in the morning at all, the
Yeah.
death of their ability to talk to you, the death of their
Bathroom.
ability to give you a hug.
Yeah,
Exactly.
shower. Death of their ability to take a shower. All these little things. Yeah.
That's exactly right. And so, you know, it was kind of heartbreaking to watch. I think anybody, and we worked with a doula, a death doula, who absolutely saved my life during that time. I could not be more grateful for her. And she herself had had some experience with addiction in the past. And she said to me, you have no idea how hard it is to break the addiction that he did when he was younger, which was why it was so heartbreaking to see it return at the end. All of that said, did it buy him more time? Probably. Did it buy him more good time? Because we would be able to go out and have dinner and play a game of pool, and he could come to his son's graduation and, you know, his granddaughter's merit certificate assembly. He got there, and he may not have been able to do that without that drug at that point in time. So I'm equal
we look at
parts.
the idea of addiction. Was there, apart from the anxiety, was there a negative side to it? Because we look at addiction as like, oh my God, he must have been like selling the TV to, you know, and hanging
Yes.
out with the guys on the end of the street. Like, was there a negative side to it other than the anxiety, which was very much what he had to deal with? Because if not, doesn't everybody going into that palliative end-of-life journey who are all pretty much given opiates, whether it's morphine, whether it's whatever, is that really not the nature of palliative care? Is not addiction
them
per
comfortable.
se, not addiction per se, but it's about keeping them comfortable, upping the dose as needed.
Yeah.
You know, what do you think?
Well, so I would say his use really increased well before we were at the lying in the bed not getting out stage.
Gotcha.
So this was when we were, so for context for people, it was 2.5 years from when he was diagnosed to when he passed. 2 years of that was pretty great. He wasn't well, he was in some pain, but generally speaking, he was living independently, he was coming to all the things, we were going on holidays, you know, in comparison to the last 6 months. The last 6 months was tough. The last 3 months was particularly tough. And the last month, there's no other word for it than brutal. Yes. And in that last month, we put him into hospice for 2 weeks, with the only objective being to get his symptoms better under control to then come home again. So we put him into hospice for 2 weeks, tried to get his meds right, tried to get him on slightly more even keel. And then he came home and had 2 weeks at home before he passed at home, which was what he wanted. And I feel so grateful and proud that we were able to deliver that for him. But the addiction piece, I think, was really sort of in that last 6 months, and particularly in that last 3 months. So we would still be out and about, and he would be great, and then he would be short and angry and moody and
Edgy,
difficult.
yeah.
Edgy, exactly what you would see from somebody who's coming down. And I think the biggest part of that was when you are an advocate, when you are their person, their primary carer, we absolutely want medical professionals holding the scalpel, administering the medication, prescribing the thing, doing the surgery. But it is our people within our family that we trust most. And one of the things that gets difficult when there is a dependence or an addiction like that is that eventually you become the one not standing in the way between them and their drug of choice, but gently trying to suggest, in line with the medical advice, that perhaps in our situation, perhaps more fentanyl isn't the answer. So Dad had this blue book. We called it the Blue Book. It went everywhere with him. It was like the master logbook to his life. And in it, he wrote every medication, every time, and sometimes other notes. But he would use it to kind of orient himself in terms of how he was feeling. And so when he would start feeling a bit edgy, a bit anxious, a bit tired, whatever it might have been, the solution to that for him became more fentanyl, more and more and more. And in the beginning that worked. And in the end, he was taking more and more, and I was watching his anxiety go through the roof. And so to have to be the person that says that, I wonder, just putting it out there, whether or not it could be that you've had so much fentanyl that you are feeling really edgy, and would it be worth perhaps taking an anti-anxiety medication that's been prescribed to you frequently by the doctors and recommended again and again? Do you think it would help to take one of those? And by that time, I think you were so in the grips of it that made me the bad guy.
Yeah.
You know? And
that when you
was
talk about,
tough.
you said that, the last part was particularly brutal for you. Is that the stuff that you're talking about? Is the cold, hard reality of the mess? It's messy. Dying can be messy. I wish that we all would just go to sleep like this one night, but dying can be very messy, particularly when you have a disease and there is the pain medication, there is the degradation of your physical body. That is so hard as a carer. You mentioned you had a doula come and help. At what point did the doula come in and what did she do?
The doula came in quite early, and she was really brought in to help with two things. And this is where I think doulas really shine. We think of doulas as birth doulas. Lots of people who've had a baby might have heard of them in that setting, but they absolutely exist and are a godsend in the other end of life. So really, there's two main functions. The first is administrative. There is so much admin when it comes to disease, disability, death, dying, ceremony, aftercare, the whole lot. There are a million steps. And if you choose to be in a hospital or a hospice, the people there will absolutely help guide you through that. But there's no kind of magical death administration fairy that flutters down and tells you what to do. You are entirely on your own. So you're hunting online, you're trying to call different services. It's really confusing. So a death doula is the closest thing that there is to that administrative death fairy. They understand the steps, whether they're dying in a hospital, hospice, or a home. They understand the steps. They can help guide you through the steps. But the other thing that they do is really spiritual guidance. And so that's mainly supposed to be for the person who is doing the dying and helping them envision what might a good death look like. Where might they want to die? Who do they want there? Who do they not want there? From the tactical things, like do they want candles? Do they want Enya playing? Do they want the windows open?
Oh, God. Did he want Enya playing? Your dad struck me as way more rock and roll than that.
He didn't. But to your point, he wouldn't engage in that with the doula. He wasn't willing to go there. I think that was probably fear. And so, but why I say she saved my life is because she stepped in and gave those same skills to me. She became my point of contact that I could reach out to whenever I was confused, whenever I was upset. She helped me understand what was going on for him at any moment in time and became a sounding board that I really desperately needed, because unless you've been through it, it is impossible. And she had been through it 100 times with 100 different people. And she was able to say to me, that's par for the course at this point in time. That's really normal. I understand why you would feel like that. Here's some things that we can do. And I'm so, so grateful for her. And I could not sing her praises. I mean, to answer your question about the last month, the actual death bit with Dad was really beautiful. It was really calm and really beautiful. And Dad had always said to me that his goal in life was to live and die with ease and grace. Now, I can't answer for him whether or not he achieved that. But what I can say is that he died the way that he wanted to, with the people that he loved most around him. And I think there's an inordinate amount of grace in that. And I feel proud.
I think it's all we can hope for, Casey.
Totally.
We are all going to die, and to know at the end that we are loved and be surrounded by that love, that's the best we can ask for.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. That's exactly right. And so the reason that I say that it was brutal, even though the very end was really beautiful, The reason that it was brutal is because some people go through what's called terminal restlessness or terminal agitation. And Dad had, by all accounts, from all of the medical professionals that I've spoken to on reflection of our doula, have told me that he had a bizarrely extended period of terminal restlessness. So there were weeks where we walked / shuffled from dawn till dusk every day, 10 hours. I've never looked better, let me say that, because we were just on the march, nonstop, all day, every day. It was like, the doula explained it to me as life force energy. She said it's the body's last ditch attempt to keep moving, to kind of outwalk or outrun what's happening. And so that bit was rough. Watching him not be able to sleep, not be able to sit, no longer be able to watch a TV series, no longer be able to sit and eat a meal at a cafe, which he loved. We used to call it second breakfast. So he would have first breakfast at home, then we'd go out for second breakfast. And when he couldn't sit there anymore because he had, it's almost like watching someone who's had too much coffee and they just cannot sit still, or a particularly ADHD child. They're like up, down, over there, back there, up, down, over there, back there. It was kind of like that. But at that point, he's using a walker or a walking stick, or eventually even when he was in a wheelchair, we had to keep moving.
Mm.
So I pushed the wheelchair up and down the cobbled streets of Fremantle for hours and hours because he just had to keep moving. And so that bit was rough, getting him into a restful, sleepy state with the nurses who were coming to our house frequently to give him more and more terminal sedation, they call it, to allow their body to go through the process that it is determined to go through, even though their mind is fighting it like you would not believe. That bit was rough, really rough. I had multiple nurses say to me they had never seen anyone in their careers with that much medication in their system still trying to get up and out of bed. And at that point, this is a formerly 100 kilo plus man, 6'3", bigger than me. And he, to be gently holding him in a bed whilst that medication kicked in because he was trying to get up and get out. If my heart was broken before, it was annihilated by the time we got through that. And, balancing medical need and clinical advice with what this person that you love so much clearly wants and needs is the roughest ride. And there's no getting around that. That is what it is. I mean, look, he wanted to die at home. I'm so proud that we were able to deliver that for him. But it took its toll. It took its toll on me. It took its toll on the other people that loved him. And that's okay because it had a finish line, a finite time. But it was, there's no other word for it than brutal.
Brutal. I call it brutal.
I'm so glad that we did it.
Yeah, I think Glennon Doyle. Glennon Doyle coined that, brutal, and it is both of those things. After my own dad's death, I was in bits. I pretty much quit writing. I quit pretty much everything, in fact, and I sat on the couch probably for 3 months. I couldn't find a way forward. I did, clearly, eventually, but I thought I knew what grief was going to be like. You're sad. That is what grief is. We are sad.
Mm-hmm.
But it was so much more. How did you get from this sort of personal devastation and processing the brutality of that last month, which I have no doubt you would have done? How did you get from there to using your experience to help others?
I've got this beautiful friend called Amy Malloy. She's a writing coach. She's an incredible writer herself. And I've always heard, I don't know whether she said it or somebody else said it, but I've always heard her say, you should write from the scar, not from the wound. I've never been able to do that. I write from the wound.
Same.
I write on the fly. I write in my notes app on my phone. I have detailed notes of everything that happened with Dad. who said what, where we were, in quotation marks, when he said something poignant to me so that I would never lose it because I was scared that I wouldn't be able to remember the things that he said. And so I have always written from the wound. I give it a beat before I publish. So bearing in mind that the book's about to come out and I'm 18 months in, just over, to that experience. And I'm really glad that I had the time. I was writing throughout the experience with Dad. Some of it I wrote with him. Some of it I sent to him and he was able to give me feedback. I interviewed him a number of times. I didn't even have the book deal at that point. But I feel so grateful that I got to shape, a lot of the ideas in this book are based off of the very in-depth conversations that he and I had on how we could do care better as a society. So my hope is that people who read it can feel him bouncing off of the pages. He was the smartest person I have ever had the pleasure of spending time with. And I had conversations with him that I just cannot replicate anywhere else in my life. It was a completely unique and different relationship. He was so present, so invested, and such a great thinker. There's nobody better that I've ever met that is able to look at something, unpack it, analyze it, and help you pack the pieces back together in a way that makes sense to you. And I'm so sad that I don't have that anymore. And I will find it in other places, but I don't have it with him and I don't have it like that, which was why I poured so much time and energy into interviewing him, capturing him, recording him, taking notes, because I wanted to bottle him up.
Yeah,
before I lost him.
I do. I love that. I get it completely. I'm currently going through the preparation for my own mum's death. She's been granted voluntary assisted dying, and we know that she will be dying soon. So I'm going through a very similar process of preparation and bottling the moment, so that we don't forget.
Which your skill set is perfect for. But I want anybody who's listening to this who's not a creative, not a writer, not on social media, just capture them however you can, even before they get sick. In fact, in the book, I have a list. There's pages of interview questions to ask them. And I tell you how to set up your camera and exactly how to do it. And since, we lost Dad and my husband's mum, my beautiful mother-in-law, I have been trying to capture more and more of my people well before there's any kind of terminal diagnosis, because that's the best time to do it. We spend so much time with our people, but we never really ask them the tough questions and what makes them tick. And once that window's closed, it's closed. But I wanted to answer your question about grief, because I think this is really important to talk about. And there are a couple of things for me. The first is that when someone is ill, terminally ill, there is a level of anticipatory grief that you are kind of watching this wall of pain coming toward you. And that is really difficult, and it's a privilege because it gives you time to quote unquote prepare, if you can prepare for that. So there's that. The second piece I would say is that even though I had that, the end came and I was in no way prepared. And I thought that I would just sort of naturally step into this next phase of bereavement, that I'd done the work, I'd read the books, I'd had the conversations, there was nothing left to say, I'd left nothing on the table, and grief hit me in the face like a sad, wet fish. I will never forget standing in front of my wall, just trying to dress myself for the day to get my children to school, because as mums, life doesn't stop just because some big awful thing has happened. So standing in front of my clothes, trying to work out just anything. I just need to put anything on my body so that I can try and get them out the door. Doesn't matter whether the bell's already gone, just getting them there. That was my goal. And I was thinking to myself, what is wrong with me? Am I just exhausted from caring? Am I depressed? Maybe I'm depressed. Maybe I've got a brain tumor. When people get brain tumors, their whole personality changes. And it was like someone had taken my sort of formerly sunny life and put a piece of shade cloth over the top of it. And everything looked like it had gone from color to black and white. And I was ruminating. I was like, maybe I'm deficient in something. Perhaps I need a supplement. Really going through the ringer, trying to work it out. And then it hit me. I was like, oh my God, this is grief. And I laughed out loud at myself because I was like, oh my God, good on you, brain, doing your very important job of trying to protect me. And, now, but then being able to label and know that I was grieving. That's what it was. And we, as you said, I think we think that grief is deep sadness, and it can absolutely be that. And it can feel like mania and sorrow and anger and rejection and a feeling of being lost or stuck, or, it can be all of these things, and they can all be grief.
All at
And
once.
it just took me a minute
that's
to
just
cotton
before
on.
breakfast.
Yeah, that's right.
And the other thing that I
and then
found,
throw in our age to the
Yeah,
mix
right.
with hormonal things going on,
Totally.
and it's like, is this
and
grief?
looking
Is
after
this
kids is
perimenopause?
totally. And I think that also remembering that the healing of that, the processing of that is not linear. So you can feel like you're getting better, and then all of a sudden you have a week where you think you're going mad, or, you just can't get your shit together. I wish now, looking back with hindsight, I could have more compassion for myself, just to stop saying, just get your shit together, get your shit together. I kept thinking about all of those people who just keep going to work. Like, how do other people do it when I'm just here on the couch? And I was dealing with the kids. I was a single parent, dealing with the kids. That I was bare minimum collie. That was all I could do. And
Yeah.
I just kept saying, other people can get their shit together, and I am like, I can't. So
it feels performative. You feel like, or I felt like I was performing life. It's like, here I am, standing here, talking to you, sipping my water. That's interesting. But it was like I was never in my body. And you mentioned something right at the top of our chat about this yearning. And I remember listening to a podcast. I think it was an Andrew Huberman Human Lab podcast. So Stanford professor of ophthalmology and neurology. And he was talking about grief. He did a really deep dive on grief. And he was saying that it is like an unquenchable thirst. So it's like a really hot day. You're very thirsty. And in front of you is a glass of water, a beautiful, amazing glass of water shining in the light. And you would give anything to be able to pick up that glass and have a sip of water. And it is just out of your reach. You will never be able to reach it, because that person, that pet, that thing, that job, that future, because we grieve all sorts of things, right? You can't access it. It's not there. So we learn to live with the thirst. We live thirsty, and you find other ways of I suppose, being able to satiate or hydrate or quench. Yeah. But you can never have that glass, that water, that person, that thing. And that was really powerful for me, hearing that, because that's exactly what it felt like. It felt like something was missing and I couldn't access it. Like that feeling when you're scared that you've left the iron on or something, and you can't quite put your finger on it. And I guess I would say that, grief can knock you, whether you're 2 days in, 2 years in, or 20 years in. I still cry at the supermarket. My mum still cries at the supermarket. Her partner died 4.5 years ago. I know plenty of people whose parent died 10, 20 years ago, and still they'll be driving in their car and a song on the radio can totally set them off. Or, for me, I'm okay on Father's Day, but on any random Wednesday at 2:45, because I see a bag of Maltesers and that's what we always used to eat together, and I'm in floods of tears in aisle 7 of Coles. So it doesn't matter how long it has lived in you. I think a really generous interpretation of that is that it's the closest connection that you ever get to them, and that it is that moment where you can feel like that's how much they meant to you. And there's something really beautiful about that. So I just try and ride the waves. Some days better than others. Monday was a disaster. Today, I'm much better.
Yeah.
We just see what comes.
I agree. The level of grief is directly proportionate to the amount of love, and what a beautiful gift to have loved so greatly. I just want to congratulate you one more time. You have written a really beautiful book, a really meaningful book, a very helpful book, not just for you to process, but for others to navigate the system, the losses, the stuff that is coming for all of us. And there is such generosity and warmth in your writing. So, huge congrats. And are you doing book launches like everywhere? Am I going to be able to come and see you at a book launch and give you a hug?
You are. You will be at the Sydney one. I'm doing Sydney and Perth. I was going to do Byron also, and I think I've probably bitten off more than I can chew. That's pretty typical of me. So I'm going to start with Sydney and Perth in the next month or so, and then we will look to do elsewhere. I'm often speaking in different cities, so I will make sure that if I am in the other cities, I will tee up something with a bookshop. I really want to get this book into the hands of as many people as humanly possible. And I think, often when something goes wrong in someone's life, we don't know what to do. We don't know what to send. Do I send flowers? They died too. They might get 50 bunches of flowers. Should I make a lasagna that goes into the freezer with all of the other lasagnas that everybody else made, and that the person will never remember who made what or who sent what flowers, especially in that kind of acute phase after a diagnosis, poor prognosis, or a death? And so my hope is that this book can help fill that gap. This is what to send when you don't know what to send, because my publisher calls it the barefoot investor of care. And I love that analogy because I would love to sell as many books as the barefoot investor. But what it means more to me than that is that they believe, and I believe, that there should be one copy of this book in every home around the country, because we are all going to go through this at some point. And if you are already caring, that's a great time to read this book. Even better than that is before you are in crisis. Read it before you need it, then put it on the shelf and focus on living forever. And then when you need it, you pull it back off and it becomes your textbook, your compassionate guide, your next of kin to guide you through the tough times.
Beautiful.
And so that's the dream. That's the hope, to get it into as many hands as humanly possible.
Wonderful. Well, all of your details will be in the show notes, how we can stay in touch with you, keep abreast of all the things that you're doing. And just in closing, there is never too much lasagna. So So the book, send the book and lasagna. Okay.
Send the book and lasagna. That's exactly right. Or put a reminder in your phone for in a month or 3 months for that person. Make them a lasagna then.
Agreed.
That's the time when everybody else has forgotten and everybody else's life has gone back to normal and you still feel completely thrown. Having a lasagna rocker.
I send flowers to people like 6 weeks after, because everyone's life goes back to normal and you're still,
Totally.
right? Everyone just forgets. Everyone's there for that like first part. Okay.
That's right.
Thank you so much, Casey. I look forward to seeing you in person soon.
Yes, I can't wait. Big hugs. Thank you to everyone for listening, and thank you so much for the beautiful work that you do and giving me the chance to share my message with your people.
Listening to Casey's story, I kept thinking about something that she said about caring for someone you love will change you in ways that you can't predict. We think we're prepared often in life. We think maybe our knowledge will protect us, and then life just has a way of picking us up by the ankles and shaking us upside down. Here's what really struck me about Casey is she didn't just survive one of the most brutal experiences imaginable, even though it was beautiful, it was brutal. She then alchemized that into something that serves others. She took her own heartbreak and turned it into a handbook. And that's something that I really see with the women that I work with. You're probably the one that everyone expects to step up, to sacrifice and to carry the emotional load. Casey's story reminds us that even when you're the expert, the human experience will humble you. The grief will knock you sideways, but your heart breaking open can become your greatest source of purpose. I've got a couple of think points for you just to consider. Who in your life might need care in the coming years, and what conversations do you need to have before you're in crisis mode? What stories might you like to preserve before it's too late? And secondly, where have you been trying to outrun your grief? Whether it's loss of a person, it doesn't have to be. It could be a dream. It could be a version of yourself. What if that unquenchable thirst isn't something to fix, but something to honor? What if the depth of your grief is evidence of how much love you carry? Remember, you don't have to be the expert. You just have to show up. And that sometimes means admitting you're drowning and letting people love you through the impossible, through the messy. Until next time, Be kind to yourself. You're doing better than you think.
I hope that you enjoyed listening to this episode of Big Stuff as much as I enjoyed recording it for you. Now, if you did enjoy this episode, it would really help me if you wanted to share it with just one person that you think is going to get something out of it. And also feel free to drop a comment. All of these things really help podcasts to gain more ears, and that's what we're really here for. Also, be sure to subscribe, then you will never miss an episode. If you want to find out more about me, who I am, what I do, then you can go and check me out at daniellecolley.com.au. I'll see you next episode for more Big Stuff.